afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another N-able boot camp. Today's session, N-able MDR, the SIEM SOC SOAR compliance pipeline. As always, get the legalese out of the way. If we make any forward-looking statements during today's session, take it with a grain of salt. Final form, function, and delivery dates may change. As always, this session is going to be recorded and everybody is on mute, but do not hesitate to ask questions as we go. Leverage the questions section inside of GoTo to do this. And for anybody joining us for the first time on the office hours or boot camps, I'm Louis Pope, one of the head nerds at N-able. My focus is on practical security controls and implementation, compliance and security in general. So I am a resource for you here at N-able whenever it comes to those topics. And for today's session, our core objectives. We're going to be looking at evolving expectations for MSPs, some of the key concepts around SIEM, SOAR, SOC, and compliance, now they're connected, some of the challenges of implementation, and live demonstration. Very much, if you already have a SIEM implemented, if you already have a SOC operation running, a lot of what I'm going to be saying today will probably be very familiar for you. You're not going to get much out of the first half of today's session. But if you just are looking for a full-on technical demonstration of the product with minimum philosophizing, you can check out a daily live product demo of MDR, along with quite a few of our other products and platforms as well. Get daily demonstrations there. And we're going to start out with evolving expectations for MSPs. So, old security concerns. Well, we're having this conversation. We're talking about MDR because MDR has not always been a thing. Used to be the concerns of MSPs and the clients that MSP supported. You're worried about major incidents being nation state backed, took specialized resources to detect and defend. And there was honestly a good argument for not worrying about those things. Most small and medium businesses were not concerned with data loss and exfiltration. They were concerned with having good backups and keeping the AV up to date, making sure that the computer's turned on. And whenever an event happened, those events were happening on an endpoint, on a workstation, or a server. That was what we were used to be concerned with. But now it's changed a lot. Ransomware is now a major concern. It's made even worse by the fact that ransomware can be consumed as a platform as a service now. It is easier and faster to start up a ransomware operation than it is to start up and run an MSP nowadays. Data exfiltration and double extortion are now a concern. Hack tools and the platforms, they're being commoditized, streamlined, made user-friendly. That's seen one way in the ransomware as a service platforms we have. Another way we see that are the initial access brokers that will gladly sell you through an online web portal credentials for compromised accounts. The move. So we used to worry about servers and workstations. That's where the important information was, and that's what we worried with. Nowadays, with the move to the cloud, you're no longer defending a castle, but a country. And things that happen will cross the borders constantly. They will affect your cloud infrastructure just as easily as it will affect your local infrastructure, and it can traverse back and forth between the two. And now we have to defend against nation states, organized transnational crime, board teams, mules, and a lot more. So what we have to defend against nowadays, what we have to be concerned with is a lot different than what it was only 5 years ago. And the expectations for MSPs have been changing. A lot of it is risk driven and regulatory and compliance. Your clients are going to be expecting an MSP to protect them from whatever cyber risk is top of mind for them. Also, on the risk side, there's been a lot of changes in what would be considered due care and due diligence. Due care and due diligence has a lot to do with what the reasonable person would do in a situation and what a reasonable cybersecurity professional would do and recommend to implement a proper security baseline in an environment is not what it was 8 years ago. It's not what it was 5 years ago. What constitutes due care and due diligence is not the same anymore. Prioritization has moved over into secure operations, so zero trust, deny by default type approach of access to things. And your clients, they are looking to transfer risk. Their relationship with you is an exercise in risk transference. So if you have never sat down and had a conversation with your clients based on risk, you may not really know or understand what they actually expect you to be doing for them. On the regulatory and compliance side, cybersecurity and data breach insurance, and also other situations such as contract bidding, they're starting to rely and require enterprise capabilities. And by enterprise capabilities, I'm just simply referring to the things that used to be only the purview of the enterprise environment is now being brought down into the SMB space and expected to be implemented there as well. Data privacy and data sovereignty laws. We've got the New York Shield Law. We have California's Consumer Privacy Protection Law. There's the all kinds of, if you're international, there's the 72-hour reporting window in France now. If you don't report an incident within 72 hours, your cybersecurity insurance doesn't have to honor a claim. There is a lot of outside forces that are pushing changes. They're causing the MSP model of business to have to change to keep up. And some of the challenges that that's bringing for MSPs, of course, is tools and licensing cost, the time it takes to train up staff to these new capabilities, staying current. So who has the time? Who's going to take on the responsibility of consuming intelligence threat feeds to know what is currently happening, what current cyber crime or current cyber campaign is ongoing, what are the indicators associated with that, and how do you go find and monitor for that? Another challenge is convincing your clients. This may represent a significant cost increase to implement what needs to be implemented to honor and adhere to the new types of regulations and expectations are out there. IR and forensics data gathering and analysis of that data is also becoming much more of a prevalent ask. Again, this used to be something that was only the concern of large major businesses. Now this is something that even small and medium businesses need to know, understand, and be prepared for, that if an event happens, what does our incident response need to look like? What type of forensic information are we actually saving and gathering? Do our technicians and engineers and end users understand that you do not turn off the computers during a ransomware attack? You disconnect them from the network to preserve data and evidence. And then on staffing, another major challenge for MSPs, finding the right people with the right skills, often at the right price, is another challenge, because it is not easy to find the people. And then whenever you do find them, they carry a premium if they are good at what they do. Also, it's the challenge of in the right location. If you're not willing to have work from home or remote workers, and you want somebody local, that's going to strain your available resource pool. And it's just the simple numbers, it's the math of it all. If you are going to keep up with modern demands, that means you're going to have to operate 24/7. And that means finding 8,760 hours of payroll to keep someone on the clock 24/7, 365, to be able to respond to incidents in minutes. And one of the reasons why, and this is a slide that I helped one of our other head nerds put together, Stephanie Hammond. And if you are more concerned on the business side of these conversations, I highly recommend checking out her boot camps on the subject. But I like using this one because it shows how out of hand these things can get, how broad your defenses now have to be today to keep up with modern threats. This is an example kill chain for using a vulnerability that was patched in Outlook a few months ago. This starts out with an attacker having some type of server out on the internet somewhere. Doesn't matter what it was. They've just got one out there. They can send an email, specially crafted, has the payload in it. Outlook client on an endpoint retrieves it. That actually loads a malicious calendar invite, which will run an executable to go do a pull of a wave file or a notification noise from that attacker controlled server. And whenever that action happens, the attacker can record the LTLM hash of that user account. And this is something that all of this happens without any interaction from the end user. And if all you have at play in your client's environments is just an antivirus or just an endpoint protection solution, and you're not monitoring mail, you're not monitoring network traffic, you probably will have missed this up to this point. But then that attacker, now that they have those NTLM hashes, they can use those for multiple additional attacks. They can use that to gain access to the M365 tenant for that client. They can use those credentials potentially to authenticate against the VPN of the environment. That then opens up the ability for lateral movement and reconnaissance. The attacker can maybe leverage RDP or other resources or other services in the environment to make those lateral movements because they have a set of valid hashes for the user. They can set up persistence. They can continue to poke around and find additional information. They can exfiltrate out all of this data. Once they've exfiltrated it out, they can start working on destroying backups, eventually moving on to downloading a ransomware payload, running that ransomware, and then encrypting data in multiple locations across the estate. And this is all something that, again, started with a single Outlook vulnerability. And this gets hard to read after the first couple of steps, but I mean, that's kind of the point of this example, to show how complex these attack chains can be, how many different layers they're going to traverse, and how hard it is to, with the old approach, to understand this and keep up with it. So moving beyond identifying and protecting. So most of what MSPs have done over the years has been on the protect and identify side of things, asset tracking, putting AV on devices, making sure they're updated, making sure the firmware is updated and vulnerabilities are patched, selling and installing an AV or endpoint protection solution, putting a firewall in place, putting a DNS filter in place. All of these things are part of the identify and protect. And most MSPs have been a little weak on the detect, respond, and recover. They probably had recover solid because, oh, hey, they got good backups and that's all they need. But on the detect and respond, they've been a little weak. In February of this year, the NIST cybersecurity framework was updated to include the new govern function. So now we're in the situation where a lot of MSPs still need to catch up to be better at the detect and respond level, at the same time that a whole new function of govern is being added in. And detect, respond, and regovern, these are the challenges. These are the harder things to do as a IT professional, as an MSP. You're going to need a couple of tools to be able to do this. First is you're going to need a SIEM solution of some sort. And a SIEM is going to provide that centralized logging for across local and cloud sources. So all of the logs, all the security event information about everything in the estate is in one location and can be found. That helps provide real-time analysis of that information because it's all in one location. You can query all of it at once. This helps facilitate your threat hunting and investigation and your ability to perform appropriate incident response. You're also going to need it for compliance, reporting, auditing, compliance. You're going to need these logs because you need to be able to say what happened, when, and where. And if you do not have that information, then you have to sometimes just assume the worst in the scenario. If you've got nothing that can tell you or show you which user accessed files and moved those files during a potential ransomware or data exfiltration event, you have to assume, well, whoever took it got everything and it's now out of our control. And this kind of leads into if you don't have vision, if you don't know what's happening, and you don't know where it happened, you're not going to be able to execute anything with confidence or speed. You are operating off of guesses, educated guesses, very educated guesses that have probably served us very well over the years. But if you don't have this data, you are having to just basically, again, educated guess based on best available information. And sometimes that works out. Sometimes it doesn't, but it's definitely not going to work out when an auditor or an insurance claim has to be filed. And some challenges around implementing a SIEM. Systems, they may be putting stuff out via an API, event logs, or syslog. You have to go through the trouble of figuring out, well, how does this system produce security event information? How do I record that system in security event information, and where do I put it? And then once you've figured out, well, this is how I get out this information, and this is where I'm going to put it, you've got the problem of, well, this is a high volume of data, and it's going to prevent manual review. You're not going to be able to have somebody sit down once a week, review all of the logs, and do any kind of meaningful, get any kind of meaningful results out of that. Not saying you shouldn't be performing manual reviews of logs every once in a while in certain situations, but at scale for the purpose of a SIEM to quickly detect and respond to a actual security incident, manual review doesn't cut it. Also, that large volume of data is going to increase the cost of storage. Skill and the time needed to implement and the skills of the individuals to do it. It's going to be a rare occasion where you can find somebody that knows and understands all of the pertinent security events out of an M365 tenant, as well as out of a firewall appliance, as well as out of just the Windows OS. That is years and years and the years of experience, and it comes with a premium. And it can take weeks or months to do this on an ELT stack. So if you decide you want to brew your own SIEM solution and you use Elastic to do it, and a lot of enterprises do this, it's not a fast or easy thing. It takes weeks or months, and even after it is done, somebody is now dedicated to the maintenance and management and upkeep of that system for forever. They have to be consuming those threat intelligence feeds to know and understand what the new threats are, what the new indicators are, and then go into the system and update the correlations and the rules to find these threats. Also, poor configuration, tuning of those detection rules. They can generate too much noise and the SIEM becomes worthless. It's just another source of noise in the environment that engineers and technicians learn to ignore. And also, cost is a very big thing with implementing a SIEM, especially if you're in an environment where there is a long time of retention required. For security operations centers, you're going to need a 24/7 SOC operation in the future, if not now. depending on your clients. Now, of course, there are smaller clients that do not need this. Their risk profiles are not high enough. But just because their risk profile is not high enough does not mean that it is not an opportunity to sell the service. And it also represents a good, solid way of making sure that you're reducing your risk exposure for that client. Because even if you do have a small client whose risk profile is low enough that they truly don't need 24/7 SOC monitoring, when and if something happens that a 24/7 SOC could have potentially caught, they're still going to be upset with you that you didn't sell them that service and protect them the way that you could have. And a SOC really needs to be a staff 24/7 operation so they can perform that initial triage, incident response, and incident management without it being something that takes a couple of hours to get to. Threat intelligence and analysis is going to be done in the SOC. They're going to be performing your threat hunting, and also they're going to be handling a lot of the compliance and regulatory adherence. The SOC team is going to be responsible for carrying and producing a lot of what you will need for compliance and regulatory adherence in a lot of cases. And I always hammer on it needs to be a properly staffed 24/7 SOC if you're going to call it one. Having a help desk or an engineer who's on call in the afternoons, being able to roll out of bed in the morning to respond to an alert while they're still half asleep, that is not a 24/7 SOC. You've got somebody on call 24/7, but that's not a 24/7 SOC with multiple eyes on dashboards ready to engage in a couple of seconds or minutes. And of course, a lot of the same challenges on a SOC staffing, but it's a SIEM, it's the cost of getting it set up in the first place and the time for somebody to manage it. On the SOC side, staffing is about the fact that you need to have bodies there 24/7. Just to have 2 people on the clock at all hours in your SOC, and that would still be a fairly small understaffed SOC. 2 full-time employees is going to be almost 18,000 hours of payroll a year you have to find. That is not something that a lot of MSPs can afford. Also, the shortage of skilled individuals and cybersecurity professionals drives up their premiums associated with those types of people that can operate a SOC. Especially if you're going to have that few people, that means you're going to have people that are more, jack of all trades, that have a lot of experience in a lot of different things, which means they're going to be that much more expensive. There's the time of implementing a SOC. It can take a full year or more to get a full SOC up and running. There's data overload and false positives they have to learn to deal with. That team has to continually have the bandwidth and the resources to upskill themselves and to be able to adapt to new tactics, techniques, and procedures being used by threat groups. Also, if you are starting out a SOC for the first time, you're probably going to have a smaller client base, which is going to affect the profit margins. And this is actually a choke point and a barrier for a lot of MSPs in their journey. There is that point in their growth where they need a SOC, they need that 24/7 service, but they can't make an acceptable profit on it because they don't have a large enough client base. And that is also exacerbated by the fact that whoever is on the SOC team needs to focus on SOC work. Your SOC engineers or your security analyst can't be the same guys that are going to get a field call where they've got to leave the office and go out into the field and do something. The next part of what you're going to need to deal with what today's threat landscape is requiring of us, you need SOAR capabilities now. SOAR capabilities are just security orchestration, automation, and response. It becomes in a bunch of different flavors. It's just another form of automation. If X happens, then Y needs to happen in response. A good SOAR platform is going to integrate separate tools, technologies, and data sources so that whenever it sees something happening somewhere in the estate, it can take an action in the appropriate location. And it's also, of course, it improves your incident response capabilities. And it's important because, time is of the essence. Every single second that passes after that initial detection event, every single second that passes without something being done in response is just increasing the likelihood that it's going to grow, accelerate, and go from a simple security event into a crisis. The challenges on implementing a SOAR is, well, you have to get your SIEM and your SOAR integrated with each other. They have to talk to each other. They need to be able to respond to each other. You need to have somebody that is writing those detection rules that can trigger the SOAR actions. The workflows and automations. You also have to be very concerned about, well, are we being too aggressive or not aggressive enough? And that takes experience. It's one of those you kind of don't figure it out as you go. Somebody needs to have already been through it to explain it to you sometimes. And it also requires continual maintenance and updating. You have to be in here and constantly, again, looking at the threat intelligence feeds, knowing and understand what is currently happening so that you can further improve your detections, rules, and correlations. And then there's just the audits and compliance. The ability to satisfy compliance audits or cybersecurity requirements are becoming more and more important. Audit-ready reports, raw data, the compliance reports, they all need to be available. They need to be something that you can produce in hours, not days. And they give you that ability to prove what happened, when, and where. And without a SIEM in place in the first place, all of this auditing and reporting, it's a challenge to get any of it done. Because if you have not been collecting and storing all of this information as you go, and all of a sudden you're on the other side of an event and you have to produce this data, that's when somebody has to come in and start doing some deeper forensic investigation, and they have to start digging through what is available, which will take more time, more effort, more money, and they're not going to come back with a complete picture. So having these SIEMs in place does a lot to make your life easier on the other side of an event. So, and the challenges around reporting and compliance, not having those proper logs and security events retention, that leads to compliance gaps. You have some industries, if you're worried about SOX Bentley, if you're worried about FINRA, if you're worried about CMMC level 2, those are all minimum 365 days of security event log retention. Failure of those audits, that could be fines, that could be loss of contracts, that could be reputational damage. And also, if you aren't able to produce these compliance reports and audits, not only on demand whenever an external third party asks for them, but also just in your day-to-day support of the environment, it's going to reduce your resiliency. If you do not have the capability to go into a client's environment and quickly say, well, I need to see every action that this user has taken over the past 5 days because I'm concerned about some unusual access I've seen. If you can't do that easily, you are going to have to do it the hard way, which means your attention and resources will be split, and a job that could have taken you 1 minute can now take you 2 or 3 days. Also, if you're not doing this, if you do not have good SIEM in place, if you don't have good reports and auditing ready to go, when something happens and data wasn't captured to explain what happened, you often have to move off of the worst assumption. This is very important whenever you're talking about data breach scenarios. If you're walking into a scenario where you know that, okay, we have lost some data has been breached and exfiltrated from the environment. If you don't have good audits and logs for that, then you have to kind of assume, well, we have to assume we lost everything. Everything was lost. We can't confidently say that it wasn't, so we have to behave as if it was. And a lot of this stuff can be done through spreadsheets. It can be done through CSVs. It's not fun. It's not going to look professional without putting some additional work into it. And then it also doesn't scale very well. So now we're going to start dropping into back and forth live demonstration in the product as we work through the N-able MDR pipeline that's going to address quite a few of these challenges that we were bringing up earlier. First is if you're going to set up a SIEM, you've got to go through the trouble of bringing in all of this information, all of these different logs from these different locations and sources. So that's your first challenge. Every one of these network, cloud, your individual endpoints, remote access, system logs, all of these are going to be vastly different in the type of information they output, the formatting of that data. It is a challenge. And if you were going to go through just the simple task of right now with no additional extra tools, just telling things to be saved in a centralized network location, that could take you days to get that implemented for all of these different things. You would have to go to, well, first you'd have to set up somewhere as a collector for all of these sys logs and event logs to go to. Then you would have to go to the appliances, tell them where to dump their sys logs. You would need to go to all of your individual endpoints, workstations, servers, install a utility like sysmon on them, and then configure them to dump their sysmon logs out to that collector. Then you would also need to go out to your cloud, figure out how you're going to get those security event notifications from your M365 tenant via API and Graph API, how you're going to get that out and down into that same location with the rest of those other logs. And then once it's all there, then you have to figure out, okay, how do I start making sense of this? And all of that, doing it for a individual client's environment can be multiple days and weeks. And once you've got all of that, again, set in a central location, and you can start aggregating it together to figure out, well, let's correlate this. Let's make sure that the events that we're seeing in our endpoints can somehow be cross-referenced and correlated to events that we're seeing out in the cloud or on the network. Again, that is more weeks, that is more months of work, especially if you have only one or two people dedicated to getting this done. It's not an easy mountain to climb. But whenever we go and we check out our N-able MDR service, we'll go over to integrations really quickly. The process of integrating is straightforward. It's come in here, choose what you want to integrate with, what you want to pull security event information out of, and you'll join it together with your with a set of API credentials for the environment. Make that hookup. When that hookup is done, that's it. You're done. The information is flowing in. So it's as simple as going and creating an API user in your M365 tenancy, adding it over here. It's done. All of the information is flowing in. For your syslogs, so anytime you're going to have your firewall appliances, your VPN appliances, your physical security access controls, anything that can put out a syslog, you can grab a VM, install that VM somewhere in the environment, and simply point your syslog devices at that collector. For your other integrations, again, we showed off Azure. We have multiple other sources that you can pull in from: network security, email security. Tons are available, and this is all represents work you do not have to do. This is removing your need for standardization, removing your need to figure out how do I correlate this stuff. You're offloading all of that into the N-able MDR service. And for the collectors on your endpoints, so your workstations, your servers, there are agents for Windows, Mac, and Linux. We already have deployment scripts prepared for Windows, so that can streamline the deployment process for you. But that handles and takes care of, again, this collection and ingestion. That's all been taken care of for you. You didn't have to figure out how to standardize this. You didn't have to figure out how to do the correlation between the events. You didn't have to find where to store all of this. You didn't have to make the network configuration changes in the environment in order for those syslogs to be pumped to a local collector. It's all streamlined. Then after we get that in, there's the threat intelligence, the dark web monitoring, the user and entity behavioral and heuristic analytics that are happening, additional data enrichment. This represents 2 to 3 individuals full-time responsibility for you if you're going to in-house this, because this is using data science. This is writing, using machine learning to generate algorithms to make detections, using a little bit of AI to do correlation and pick out things. This is all stuff that is being done for you in the N-able MDR offering automatically with no additional actions from you. All you had to do was get the data into the system. Then it starts picking out all of these events for you. Just as some examples in here, these are a bunch of actions that have happened. Here is ransomware canary encryption detected. So there was an event because of all of this information that's being ingested into the environment. There was ransomware encryption detected on a canary network, so a honeypot, because of a high rate of entropy in the files. So it was detected on this location on this server. So this is something that in a matter of seconds after it happening, I'm already being alerted of it here in the platform, and I can get the remote isolation in response to that. So not only is it that I am getting the ability of the platform to do the correlations and understand the connections, we're also moving into the ability to have SOAR actions and additional threat hunting, those automated SOAR responses, as well as your ability or the ability of the N-able MDR SOC team to leverage this information for additional discovery, to look around and say, hey, okay, we had this particular event that happened. We had the SOAR action that automatically triggered to isolate that device on the environment, but we can see that there was maybe additional communication, additional traffic to that device. So if I go find that device, see what other traffic was flowing to it, may see that there was additional lateral movement or another system in the environment where it was making the calls to perform the actions, then those can also be isolated. There's also other detections in here, just as some examples of what's automatically be happening for you. And again, your team is not having to come in here and write these additional detections, write these additional rules. Suspicious scheduled tasks being created. We can also have, let me change out to a different demo environment. You'll also see situations like darknet exposure. You have a set of credentials, a user, their information is exposed in a data breach somewhere. that can trigger a SOAR action in the platform to automatically go and reset, have that user reset their password on next login. That is, again, this is time and effort. These are rules and correlations that you do not have to build out and develop yourself or maintain over time. This changes your engagement with a SIEM, SOC, and SOAR solution, and the ability to have these remediations and automations in play, to have the reporting in the platform as well, so that you can quickly come in, audit visually, come in and generate these administrative or executive reports. Something as simple as, we need to know and understand what the multi-factor authentication coverage for our M365 tenant is. Well, that is something that is, if you've ever done that the manual way, that is not fun inside of Intra, Azure, or M365. But it is as simple as running reports out of the system, audit reporting, and Microsoft 365 MFA coverage report. Run it, it's done. You don't have to go, write a PowerShell script that's going to use Graph API to reach over into the tenant, authenticate into the tenant, and then pull all the needed information, parse it out, and then present it to you. This is just a simple build the report, get the CSV output, you're done. No coding skills, no deep, intimate knowledge of how M365 or Azure operates to get that information out. Needing to know firewall modifications, what modifications have happened on a firewall or VPN appliance over the time frame. This is, again, something that if you are trying to do this manually and cobble together the information, it takes time and effort, it takes skill, and it's something that is very easy to miss something, get wrong, skip over a piece of important information. So all of these things together, having this capabilities is going to be really important to get you from that initial step of knowing, all right, what do we need to collect logs for? After we know what we're going to collect logs for, how do we collect those logs? Where do we put them? Once we've put them there, how do we make sense of them? How do we make them useful for us? How do we make them useful for a SOC to dig into them, to understand the scope of a situation? How do we build reporting and auditability off of that data? This is all things this is why whenever you ask somebody who has ever stood up a SOC themselves internally in an environment on the enterprise scale or on a large business size, they will tell you it takes somewhere around 2 years to get all of this done, because there is so much of a lift, there is so much work to be done. So we're going to spend the last bit of the session here. We got about another 30 minutes left. We're going to break this into demonstration and Q&A time. So as we're going through this, if there are any questions, feel free to throw those into the questions panel. I will check those out and try to keep those answered as we go. Otherwise, we'll spend a few minutes here showing off some of these time savings, some of these things, some of these capabilities, kind of work through the how could you, if you decided to go with N-able MDR, what would it look like to get this up and running in a day for a client. So starting out first is, well, first thing you're probably going to want to collect from are your endpoints. If you are using Insight or N-central, we already have the deployment scripts written for you so that you can add them to Insight or N-central, and it will install the collector agent on all of your endpoints for you. So this is a process that will take you all of, if you're doing a single client, it'll take you 15 minutes maybe inside of Insight or N-central to get this done, since we already have this scripting written for you. After that's done, we're only at 15 minutes. Then we'll go into integrations and we'll go over to, well, we need to tie it to our identity management platform, whether that's Azure, Google Workgroups. We can come in and add Azure, add M365, whatever it is we're going to add in here. We'll go in all, we'll say maybe we're going to do Google Workgroups. Oh, am I looking at it right? Okay, yeah, there we go. But you'll come through, do your Google Workgroups, do your Azure, come in and add your firewall appliance. If the firewall appliance supports API, you can do that. If it doesn't support API, then we'll go to the VMs, grab that VM for the collector agent, install that somewhere in the environment. If you already have a virtualization platform in that environment, an ESX box or a Hyper-V server, this is something that a technician or engineer can get taken care of in a matter of probably 25 minutes. So we're only up to about 35, 40 minutes of time at this point to get your devices and your endpoints enrolled, your servers enrolled, your Azure Intra M365 enrolled, and a VM deployed to start collecting syslog. Then you'll go out to the firewall appliance, you'll go to your VPN appliance, and you'll change them to point to that new syslog collector in the environment. You're probably at about an hour and a half, 2 hours at this point in total time spent. At this point, you've probably got all of your needed ingestion done in most environments. And you're only about 2 hours in, data is flowing in, it's being saved, it's going to be adhering to whatever retention policy you have, and you're already going to have a 24/7 SOC consuming and looking at this information for you. And you've done this all in maybe 2 or 3 hours time. Now, exception supply, this is only going to be about the time it takes you to do one client with a fairly standard setup. But we've had, I've seen larger deployments of this only take a week or two to bring in thousands of users. Once it's in play, though, your job, your responsibility, because of so much of what this platform is doing for you, you don't need a 24/7 staff SOC yourself. You are leveraging the 24/7 SOC services that are behind this with the managed detection and response service. You will get direct contact to this team. So whenever something actually does happen, something goes sideways, and you need to directly contact the SOC team, you're not putting in a ticket and waiting for them to get back to you eventually. If it's a bad enough situation, you can just dial them up. And for US hosting, this is a US based SOC team. So it is a 24/7 US based SOC that is behind this. So if you have clients that are concerned about that, you can give them some warm fuzzies about that. Once you've got all of this information in, it's flowing in, the SOC team, the SOAR actions, they're all triaging, remediating this, taking actions for you. If something raises to the level that it is declared an actual incident that needs to be fully investigated, they can assist with that. They can even perform those more advanced remediations. It's not just the SOAR actions that they'll take. They'll establish a playbook with you, and if it is necessary to start shutting down other devices in a network, they can do that for you. They're able to isolate those devices to prevent a potential compromise from spreading across the network. And they can do that for you at 5 in the afternoon or at 3 o'clock in the morning. Day to day after that, you're able to use the platform for improving your security stance to harden your environments and make them more resilient. It is with the compliance insights, it will point out to you whenever there are some misconfigurations that are found in the environment. Whenever you have stale accounts, maybe for group policy violations. This one will show us, and this one is pointing out 6 of them in this environment. This is showing us, hey, these are where you're having some potential compliance policy violations because of your GPOs. One is, the lockout for number of bad access attempts is set at 10. It should be less than 6 or equal to 6. Maximum password age being set at something ridiculous. If audit policies are disabled on a device. If the number of days for retention of application log information is incorrect. There's all types of additional little additional security baselines or additional resiliency that you can leverage the platform to implement that's going to reinforce your ability to adhere to a framework or a standard and be able to show that you are compliant and successfully get through an audit if when it occurs. This will also give us for at-risk shares, showing us that, hey, you have shares in your environment that are over permissive. Why do you have a file share for a whole drive with everyone having access to it? That's probably bad. Go address it. You can even visualize this through accounts, groups, and endpoints. This gives you additional information about the state of your environment, which can assist you without, again, having to go out and pull the logs, pull the configuration data for all of this. Do the discovery. It is bringing it all natively for you into the platform. Just the file shares alone, that represents, if you've got one technician or one engineer that can go and do that for you and perform that type of audit to make sure that there are not file shares in the environment that are over permissive or misconfigured, that could be half of their week to do that for only a handful of clients. This will facilitate them being able to audit that and review it in just a few minutes or hours for all of your clients. This can even down into visualizing this and further assisting them with being able to discover those misconfigurations and those items that need to be addressed. We can also do visualizations of privileges on the shares as well as users. And then into detection. So we talked earlier about how much effort and time simply goes into writing the correlation rules, writing the new detection rules to pick out from all of this data that's coming in the actual things that represent a legitimate security event, something that actually needs to be addressed and looked at. But you also have the ability to come in and add custom detections if you want to. So just something as simple as I need to be alerted anytime that a new user account is created across the board. This is something that if you tasked your team with figuring out how they would do this, I'm sure they would come up with some way of being able to do it, but it would be something that would take them days to a little bit of time to research, a little bit of time to implement, and then they'd have to maintain it. Whereas this is something that I can come in here, quickly add, and it's done. It was that simple. I will now get an alert anytime a new account is created in this tenant. Research. So further down that line of the time and effort it takes to find and discover these things. This is all KQL queries, but let's say you need to know anything and everything that happened concerning a particular user. I can come in here and actually, we'll pick on somebody. We'll go for Robert. the user Robert in this environment. I can search and here is everything that happened concerning this user over the time frame. So I can see anything and everything related to this user. And if it is something that is pertinent to what I am investigating and looking for and trying to figure out, I can easily add it to an investigation. So I can run a investigation in this platform fairly easily. I can add that there. I see I have all my raw data available there as well. Come down here to another page. Maybe I found some other additional information that I wanted to add to an investigation. I could add it. But it is this simple. Just, again, if you task your technicians and your engineers to go out and find you, hey, find anything and everything that this user has done over the past 2 days. And you don't have a SIEM in place. You were not recording these logs. You weren't putting them in a centralized location and parsing them out. This represents, again, hours of work that is now something as simple as a string search. And even further down the compliance chain. So we've talked about the facilitating this as this is work and time that your techs and engineers don't have to devote into building up these capabilities, but it's also time and effort they don't have to put into maintaining and keeping it up. You're offloading the infrastructure maintenance. You're offloading the creation and writing of new rules. You're offloading the need to keep somebody on the clock 24/7 to monitor the dashboard. And and even further down compliance, there's the ability to do your compliance reporting through this. So as an example, HIPAA clients. HIPAA compliance reporting or even, excuse me, or something needing to adhere to high trust, whatever it may be. It is a process. It is a process by which somebody has to sit down and record and answer a bunch of questions. If you've never done it before, it's not hard. It's just tedious and time consuming. And there are 101 spreadsheets out there that will guide you through it. But right here in the platform, we have a guided questionnaire to go through and answer all of these questions about, are you doing these things or not? And you can do this yourself. This can be part of a service that you offer, that you will go and engage, and you will perform a pre-screening for adherence to a regulatory standard that's on the list here. Go through the self-guide, go through this, fill out the answers, and charge for it. Or you can offer this out to clients that that, hey, it's like squeezing blood from a stone. You'll never get them to pay you to do the audit, but you know that they'll probably sit down and fill one of these out. Well, give them access to the platform, let them start filling this out, and they're either going to get halfway through it and get frustrated and walk away from it and ask you to help because they don't know how to answer the questions, or they'll get through it, discover their own deficiencies, and bring you in and say, hey, how do we fix these things? And this will be part of a service. This can be part of the backbone of a compliance service that you offer around HIPAA or around PCI DSS. So we haven't seen many questions come into the chat that have not already been answered. We're getting close to the end of content and everything that we were going to be addressing today's session. We'll keep it open here for another minute or 3, just so we can get some additional questions in if anybody has any. If you have some technical staff, engineers, other members of your team that you would like to see this session, it should be available in the N-able U as a recording in a few days. Also, if you just want a full-on technical demonstration of the product, make sure to go check out the N-able daily demos that are available. Full mapping. All right, so let me get back in here. There we go. I had a question for this slide. And this slide does a pretty good job of explaining. There we go. this full flow. This is getting you your whole flow from the initial SIEM ingestion. So you are replacing your need for an independent SIEM here with N-able MDR. And then here with 2 and 3, you're replacing your need for a dedicated SOC and a dedicated team of rule writers and threat intelligence researchers to make those new rules, to make those new detections. And here on 4, you're leveraging the ability to auto respond, the SOAR actions, the SOAR capabilities. And also by the time you get over here, you're also leveraging that SOC for actual remediations. Them engaging for you on your behalf to isolate devices in a network if they start detecting lateral movement. And then the reporting, that gives you your ability to have a source of truth about what happened, when, and where. This becomes the place you go whenever somebody asks that question of, hey, did this or when did this happen? So at the moment, so a good question came in. What are the integrations right now with the N-able MDR service and any of our other platforms? At the moment, there's no ingestion integrations at the moment. N-central is currently going through some major upgrades. One of the things that we been talking about for a little bit and announced at Empower a few weeks ago were some improvements to the N-central API, as well as some new logging capabilities. So the intent is that now, today, no, there is no integration, but in the future, yes, there should be a way for the events and the actions that happen inside of N-central to be pulled into here as well. Right now, the only integrations is really on the deployment capabilities, leveraging N-central or Insight to deploy the collector agent to the individual endpoints. All right. Does not look like we have any new questions coming in. If you've ever been to any of my other boot camps, this was a lot less technical, but that's kind of the benefit of the N-able MDR services. You don't have to be a skilled technical individual. You can come in here as a single solitary MSP owner operator with only yourself and consume this platform and be able to go out and deliver 24/7 SOC services. Because so much of the hard work, so much of the skills, so much of the specialized knowledge, and simply the sweat of getting this stuff done has already been taken care of for you. I'm going to throw out the customary poll of, how was today's session? How useful was it for you? 5 being useful, 1 being not very useful at all. Let us know, the feedback lets us know if we're on the right track or we need to make modifications to the content. All right, got some additional questions coming in. So one of these, can we only offer EDR and provide the 3 services? So I think I got what you're saying there. With EDR, the only downside to EDR is it is endpoint detection. And it's only going to ever be concerned with what's happening on the endpoints. So the downside there is that you don't have that full scope of knowledge of what's happening in other locations. You don't know what's happening. You don't know that somebody tried to log in to the Outlook web application for a client from an IP address in Lithuania if all you have is EDR. You'll never know that they accessed it from there. You'll never know that they created a new user in the environment from there. You'll never know that they then reached over and accessed the VPN. So if you only have EDR, you're losing out on a lot of what this is doing for you. Your vision is not as broad. Kind of like I said a lot earlier, you're no longer just defending a castle, you're defending a country against and across which the borders of that estate are constantly being crossed. And this will be eventually the goal is, the intent is that with a solution like this, with a we are calling this N-able MDR, but if you kind of break it down and explain it in a full definition of it, it is extended detection and response capabilities offered as a cloud native platform with a 24/7 SOC incident, 24/7 SOC and threat hunting engagement with remediation and SOAR actions built into it. That's a lot longer than just saying enable MDR, but I think it gets the point across a little bit better about what's involved in this. So with this offering, the way this is licensed out, you pay your license cost for this and you get everything. The SOAR and the SIEM and the SOC are not different charges. This is one cost for the whole platform. It's going to be device-based, similar to everything else that we offer on licensing. Some nice things about this for anybody that has been involved with or consumed a SIEM service before from somewhere. This does not charge you additional for ingress or egress on the syslogs. So if you are in a situation where the amount of data you pump into your SIEM affects the cost of the service, this product does not, this service does not work that way. There is a flat fee that you charge, that we charge per device, and we do not charge you more because you're pulling more data in 1 month than you were the previous month. The retention by default is 30 days for all data ingested, but you can set up separate retention dates, separate retention for different tenants. So if you have one client that needs to be 365 days, you can set that for them and leave your other clients at just the default 30 days if you need to. And we've got some handouts for this, and actually, no, I go ahead and throw those in the download section. Give me 1 second. I do have some additional one-pagers for N-able MDR. I'll save you the time. We're having to go track these down somewhere. I believe this will be one of them. Yep, we'll throw that one into the handout section. And we will throw, so I'm going to throw a few of them. So feel free to check the handout section of GoTo, and I will have a few. And again, there is the daily tech demo of MDR. So if you have other members of your team that you want to have that more technical experience and demonstration, check that out. There is also a full proof of concept trial with this platform. So if you are interested in this, you do get to kick the tires. You get to have the full platform with the engagement of the SOC service so you can see how it actually feels and plays out. This isn't a situation where we say, trust us, it's great. You actually get the platform fully functional to test it out for 30 days, which is a significant difference in a lot of other like SIEM SOC services. It's usually a agree to the contract, sign the contract, and then see and feel what it feels like after you're already committed for a year or two. So this also helps out any of you that are on the smaller side, that don't have the resources to commit to something that's, honestly a more expensive service than what you may be used to. All right. Doesn't look like we've got any additional questions coming in. If you throw in a question and I did not answer it, feel free to throw that in again so it'll float up to the top so I see it. Otherwise, we're going to just say we've covered the content that we had planned for today. If you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can get you whatever information you need or answer any questions you have. I'll throw that in the chat. If you're actually interested in this and you actually want to give it a go, reach out to your partner success manager, let them know you're interested in it. And if you do give it a try, hopefully I'll see you on the other side doing the onboarding or the product demo for you on the initial pass. And keep in mind, this is just a short blush of the product and platform. There are tons of additional capabilities, functions, and features that we did not get into. So there's even more to uncover. There's more security resiliency that you can get out of the platform, its ability to help you find and keep track of things like the over permissive shares, being able to visualize what shares, what privileges are set up on a device. Just imagine how hard it is to reach out into an environment and find all of the hidden admin shares. So the C $signs, D $sign shares. If you don't even know what those are, well, there's a little bit of homework. Go look up what hidden shares are or hidden admin shares are. Get familiar with them. But if you do know what they are, you know that's a headache to go track them down sometimes. This platform even facilitates making that easy for you. If you are not a current N-able partner, check out our, let me see. All of our bootcamp recordings are available inside of N-able U. So that would be you'll need to be an N-able partner to get access to the recordings. If you are not a current partner, we do have some recordings available publicly that you can get access to. I'm grabbing the address for you right now. I'll throw that in the chat. So 2 sources. There is here. The recordings we have available out on N-able U. There are some recordings there. Also out on N-able as well. There we go. And also at the end of today's sessions, if you do want a recording, if you do want a link for today's session, just let me know in the questions panel. At some point today, I'll be able to send you out a link for this session, but it will be some amount of a time to live on that, so it will not be a permanent link. It'll only be good for a few weeks or so, but I'll be able to also get that link out for you for today's recording. All right, everybody. Looks like we got all the questions in the chat addressed. Thank you for taking the time to join us. As always, we appreciate the fact that it's quite an ask to have you come join us for an hour or two and listen to a vendor, but we do appreciate the fact that you did take the time to do it. We'll give everybody back a few more minutes of their day. And hopefully you got something useful out of today's session, and we will see you on future boot camps or office hours.